Okay, so we're starting chapter 10, which is the urinary system, also known as the renal system. Okay, let me see if now I gotta figure out where okay, there we go. Okay, so what are the organs of the urinary system? So the organs are the kidneys. Normally we have two kidneys. They're bean shaped. They're about the size of a bar of soap or your hand, your fist, and that's where your urine is actually produced. They're kind of they sit above your hip bones, but kind of below your ribs on your back. We have two ureters, which are little muscular tubes, and they're going to take the urine from the kidneys after it's made all the way down to the bladder. We only have one bladder, and the bladder can stretch, so it can get bigger if you have a lot of urine in it, and it can get smaller if you don't. Okay, so it holds the urine until we urinate. We have one urethra, and the urethra is going to be the tube that leaves the bladder and takes the urine to the outside of the body. Okay, and in females it's short, and in males it's longer. Okay, so if we look here, okay, so here's the rib cage. This is the hip bone. Okay, so you can see where the kidneys sit. On top of the kidneys, there are glands they're called the adrenal glands, and they produce the hormone aldosterone. Aldosterone is going to help us retain fluid if we need to. Okay, here's your kidneys. They're going to make urine. Okay, there's the ureters that are going to take the urine down to the bladder, and then the urethra is the tube that goes to the outside. Okay, so important blood vessels that go to it. So here's the inferior vena cava, which is going to take deoxygenated blood back to the heart. Here's the aorta, which is bringing oxygenated blood down. Okay, and then we have renal arteries taking blood to the kidneys and renal veins bringing blood back. This is the diaphragm. Okay, so that's the muscle that separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. Okay, and these are called the iliac veins and arteries. Okay, so the functions. So every book kind of gives a different list of functions, but here's the main functions of the urinary system. So we're going to excrete metabolic waste. So we have to get rid of things that have nitrogen in them because they'll make us sick if they build up. They help maintain water, and usually we regulate salt in order to maintain water. It helps, the urinary system helps regulate the pH of our blood. Okay, our blood needs to stay at 7.35, between 7.35 and 7.45, so the kidneys can help us do that. They make two important hormones, renin and or EPO, erythropoietin, which we talked about when we talked about blood cell production. Okay, they also are going to reabsorb some nutrients that are being filtered so that we don't urinate out things that we need. Okay, so you don't want to urinate out something that's good for you. They convert vitamin D to calcitriol so that we can retain calcium. They help control blood volume and blood pressure, which that ties in with this maintenance of salt and water balance. Okay, and they get rid of some toxins. They detoxify some free radicals. Okay, so the first thing is excretion. So mainly what we're trying to get rid of are what we're calling nitrogenous wastes. So nitrogenous wastes are molecules that have nitrogen in them. So we're trying to, there's three different kinds of nitrogenous waste. So there's urea, uric acid, and creatinine. Urea is made when we break down amino acids. Okay, uric acid is if we break down nucleotides like molecules from DNA and RNA. And then creatinine is if we break down creatine phosphate, which is energy phosphate carrying molecule in muscle, which we haven't talked about yet. Okay, so what's a waste? So a waste is anything that our body can't use, so it's a substance that's useless to the body. Metabolic waste is something that's produced from our cell metabolism. So it's a byproduct of the breakdown of molecules. Okay, so feces is not considered a metabolic waste. Okay, so feces is just a plain old waste because it's stuff that we can't use. Let's see. So I have 3 pictures on here. So uric acid, I want you to just see that these have nitrogen in them. Uric acid, urea, creatinine. Okay, so the nitrogenous waste, actually, if they build up, they're toxic. Okay, and this just shows where they come from, which I just mentioned that. Okay, so the way that we determine how much nitrogen is in your blood is this test called a BUN, or blood urea nitrogen. So normal's between 8 and 20 milligrams per deciliter. So if you go into renal failure, there's different things that can happen. So one of them is called azotemia. That's abnormal levels of nitrogen. So it's just going up. It's too high. It's greater than 20. Uremia, though, is what happens. Those are the symptoms that you start to see as you have azotemia. So you start to see toxic effects happen as the waste accumulates. So it can cause diarrhea, vomiting, it can cause irregular breath, dyspnea, can cause cardiac arrhythmias, so your heartbeat is not regular. Usually you don't see uremia occur until you have 90% loss of renal function. So it's pretty amazing. You can actually, your kidneys are so good at doing what they need to do that we can survive with 1/3 of one kidney. Okay, so if your kidneys aren't working anymore, that's when they'll start to do hemodialysis, or lots of times they just call it dialysis. So dialysis is when they're going to take your blood out of your body and they're going to remove the toxins, and then they'll put your blood right back in. Okay, now number 2 and number 3 were maintenance of water, salt, and acid-base balance. So these are negative feedback loops or homeostatic mechanisms. The big thing about water-salt balance is it's going to be how we maintain our blood pressure. There's hormones that are going to be released depending on what's going on in our body, and they're going to regulate our sodium levels, and they'll regulate our water balance. Okay, now the kidneys are a really important buffering system for our body. So what they can do is they can actually, if we become too acidic, they can excrete hydrogen ions, or they could reabsorb bicarbonate ions if we're too acidic. So it's going to help us maintain our blood pH. Okay, now the hormones that they make. So renin's actually an enzyme, and it's made by the kidneys, and what it does is it tells the adrenal glands to release this hormone called aldosterone. And aldosterone is going to cause us to retain sodium. So if we retain sodium, we're going to hold on to water, and that's going to decrease urine output. Okay, EPO is a hormone that we talked about before, that it's released by the kidneys to stimulate red blood cell production if your oxygen level is too low. Okay, now the 5th thing was we reabsorb filtered nutrients and convert vitamin D. So there are things in our blood that get filtered and put into this stuff called filtrate, and I'll talk to you about it here more in a minute. It goes into the filtrate, and instead of having it be secreted and released in our urine, we have to pull it back into the bloodstream. So the urinary system does that, and then the kidneys are also responsible for converting vitamin D, and that's going to help us hold on to calcium. Okay, so it helps us hold on to calcium so we can build strong bones and muscles. Or not muscles, strong bones and teeth. Sorry. Okay, now I'm going to stop here.